go ahead and get started tonight. I did not get more. I've got more notes. I just didn't get far enough to where I could print it, and it'd be nice on 2 sheets of paper, so I'll give it out next week. So we're going to continue, and we're going to hopefully finish up the Sermon on the Mount tonight. We're talking about discipleship. We're talking about making disciples. We're talking about being a disciple, right? You can't make disciples if you're not being a disciple to begin with. And we ended last week with the talking about giving to the needy, about praying and fasting. What were our big takeaways from last week of Jesus' comments about praying, fasting, and giving to the needy? If you do it to be seen by others or for others, right? Because you're doing stuff for others, but to be seen by others, right? The reward is limited to the acknowledgement you receive here on earth. Anyone else? Where'd the mics go? Oh, you're sneaky. Like a ninja. Anything else? What is the problem? And that's, religion is one of those weird things where you don't want the praise, you shouldn't want the praise and glory, right? And this is kind of the conundrum. But religion also asks you do things that are going to be seen and known by men. And no matter what you do, somebody can always say you're doing it for the wrong reason, right? But what we're talking about, and we're talking about discipleship, right? We're talking about the hidden character inside of us, right? Being true to ourselves, knowing why we're doing what we're doing, right? And what intentions we have behind it. And, Jesus starts off the section in Matthew chapter 6 with the word beware, right? Beware of practicing your righteousness before men. But somebody read Matthew 6:33. And this is kind of where he ends this section. Matthew 6:33.
But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you.
Do you see the difference between those, the verse 1 and verse 33? Beware of practicing your righteousness. Seek first the kingdom and his righteousness. And so there's a contrast, and I think Jesus is using these words intentionally, that when it's your righteousness, you are doing it to earn something. You are doing it to try to, somehow show your religious nature. And Jesus ends with, if you are seeking God's righteousness, right, which is a hidden righteousness, it's a secretive righteousness, but it's also a righteousness that will be seen, right? Back in chapter 5, he says, you are to be a light unto the world so that people can see your good works. And the paradox is you don't do it to be seen, but inevitably you will be seen. And we talked a little bit about Daniel, right? Daniel would go into his room and he would pray 3 times a day. People knew he was doing that only because it was a part of his life. It was a part of his everyday pattern, right? He wasn't doing it to be seen, but naturally you're going to be seen. Fred, go ahead.
This discussion kind of reminds me of Simon the sorcerer. When he saw, obviously he's a sorcerer, so that means he's been doing magic, and he's been doing magic to fool people and then probably make a living at it. And he sees what the disciples of Jesus are doing and the miracles they're performing, and his idea was, hey, this could help me make my magic better, probably, or have some intention. And he gets scolded pretty severely. Yeah. Peter said to him, your money perishes with you, because thou hast thought that the gift of God may be purchased with money. Thou hast neither part nor lot in this matter, for thy heart is not right in the sight of God. So this topic we're kind of talking about is, if your intention is to be seen of men, it's contrary to what God really wants for you.
Yeah, and could Simon have justified why he wanted that gift? Right? Hey, I want to do this because I want to help people. I want to do this because I would like to be able to do the thing. Well, Peter, obviously, reading the room, right? Or Philip, Philip's reading the room, and he understands and sees what he is. Now, but put yourself in Simon the sorcerer's position just for a moment. Like I think about him, when I read that, you have duped people for a living and made money off it. Imagine having the real thing, right? Imagine having something that is actually, or you're not having to, maybe smoke and mirrors. You're not having to, and you've got this real gift. And I think when he first encountered Jesus, and this is, thank you for bringing this up, by the way, because I think this is super practical. I think when he first encountered Jesus and he heard about the gospel, he wanted it. Obviously, he was baptized into Christ. He was committed. And then it was after his conversion, he saw a way in which he could use Christianity also to his benefit, right? And some of that old man, that old part of him came back. And if that's not the most real thing that Christians deal with, right? How many Christians do you know who've, when you're studying with them and they're ready to make that decision to have their sins washed away, they are on fire, they're excited, they want God, they want Jesus. And in that moment, if Simon was asked, hey, if you could have this gift to buy, no, he's for real. But afterwards, what can happen? Does the world does Satan stop trying to tempt you? Does Satan's tricks get any, less effective to Christians just because we're now in Christ? No, if anything, what does Satan do? He ramps it up, right? He was like the roaring lion, and he's looking. He knew exactly, right, what Simon needed. And Simon, unfortunately, started off with the right things, and look where he ended. And this gets back to, and I've brought this up before, but what we know of the beginning of the Pharisaical movement was the Pharisees saw how the Jews had become so much like the rest of the world that, does anyone remember what the word Pharisee means in the Greek? It actually means to be called out. It's another Greek term that means to be separate, to be apart. And so they wanted to be the separated ones to help Israel become more religious. And by the way, when they did that, that's actually what led to the Maccabean revolt, which led, the hammer. I keep thinking, want to say Jason, but it may not be Jason the hammer. Maccabee, he was a Pharisee. He was a part of that sect, and he was a part of the priesthood. And he wanted, they were sacrificing a pig on the altar in the temple, which is an unclean animal, and they also had Zeus in the altar. And he cleansed it, he cleared it, and he wanted to purify Israel. But can good intentions become muddled because we allow the worldly pulls and the worldly desires and the worldly reward get in the way? I think so. And that's why he's not just saying, he's saying beware of what the Pharisees are doing, because he's saying you guys have the potential to fall in the same trap. And if you know the apostles, have they been close to falling in that same trap? The 12? Who will be the greatest? Who will sit at the right hand, when your kingdom has come? Right? And, Jesus even says, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees. Right? And so we also have to be careful, right? Because I remember, once again, young preacher out of preaching school, and you go in for the right reasons, right? You go in because you want to save people. You go in because you want to teach the gospel, and then you start hearing, man, that was great. Man, that was good. Man, and you hear a lot of compliments as a young kid. What can that do to you? It can go to your head. You don't want to go there, but if we don't put up barriers, right? Romans 13 says, beware of the snare of the devil, right? Beware of his traps. Stay on guard, right? Because at any moment, any of us are one or two decisions away from doing the same thing for the wrong reason, right? You get too much up here, and all of a sudden you're doing it now for what people say. And if people don't say it about me, all right, if people don't acknowledge it, then why am I even doing this? And this is exactly the opposite of what Jesus is saying. He says, seek first his kingdom, right? Now, interestingly enough, we're going to get into verse 19 through 24. We're going to, we kind of talked about giving to the needy, having to pray, fast. Now, here's the thing. Did Jesus say stop giving to the needy? Did he say do it so secretive that no one ever sees you? Did he say stop praying? Did he ever tell them to stop fasting? No. He just said when you do these things, here's how you do it. Here's why you do it. And here's why you don't. Now, verse 19, here's another interesting aspect to especially a Jew. Someone read 19 through 24 of Matthew chapter 6. Who wants to do it? Raise your hand and Don will bring you a mic. Anyone? All right, Fred, you got it?
Since I'm here already.
Tom, I'll get you next.
All right, Matthew 6, 19 through 24.
Yep.
All right, lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. The light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. But if thine eye be evil, thy whole body shall be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness? No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon.
Okay, so interestingly enough, for a Jew, part of the blessings of being a Jew was actually material gain. It was, as a nation, when they were doing well as a nation and they were well off and they were wealthy, God promised to bless them in that way, right? So, do you see why they may have trouble with the idea of wealth and money, right? When that was a part of the blessing. Now, here's the difference. Here's the difference. When you serve God, right? Serve God, and the blessings that follow, let's say wealth is one of them, especially for the Jewish nation, this is a consequence of this. What he's saying is they got so enamored with this, they started doing this for this, rather than for whom? Rather than for God. You see, and this is one of the things that I keep bringing up about prayer. How many times does prayer feel like us trying to manipulate God into doing our will? You ever felt that way? Or you ever heard a prayer that felt like that? And it's very, God, work your magic in my life, right? Work out the things exactly the way I'm asking. Like, we get real specific too. God, I don't want you just to bless this person. I want you to bless them in this way. And if it doesn't get blessed in this way, they're not going to, and we get upset when things don't happen our way. And we're almost trying to use God to say, God, I need this to happen my way. All right, we may even throw in, well, if it's your will, let it be done. But do we really believe that? Are we really asking that? And it's the same thing with this. If they knew they could do this and get this, and this is their motivation, well, then this becomes meaningless. Right? It's the same thing that Paul brings up in Philippians about doing all things without grumbling, murmuring, complaining. Right? Have you ever had somebody do something for you, or you watched them do something and they complained about it the whole time? Oh, I know this person really needs help, but I really have better things to do. Why am I doing this for this person? And then at the end, they're like, wow, look at this great thing that I did. I was like, yeah, but you complained the whole time. Right? You complained the whole time. You really negated, in my mind, everything that you've done because you didn't want to be there. The person didn't feel like you wanted to be there. Everyone that was serving alongside you knew you didn't want to be there. Don't claim the glory, right? When you murmured and complained. It's the same thing here. God can see, why are you serving me? And I think that's a question we have to ask ourselves as disciples of Jesus. And I think, and I'm not, even coming to the building, like, why are you here tonight? And we have to ask that question all the time, like, why am I here? What am I doing here? Right? Is it, for the Light Post app to check in? Right? Can't tonight? Oh, you can. Look at all these faithful people here without a Light Post app. Tomorrow's going to throw our attendance stuff off all over. Yeah. I'm sorry. You're not going to know what to do yourself. But that's the point. Like, why are you here? Right? What's the purpose? And as we talked about ended last week with, that it's not always a gooey feeling to want to be here. But we make commitments, right? We have desires that necessarily don't match our feelings all the times. And that's why you need to make commitments. That's why it's actually good to write down your commitments and to have standards for yourselves. It's because when you're not feeling the way you ought to be feeling, you're not feeling like you want to be somewhere, you really, okay, but I've made my commitment, right? I'm on this carnivore diet right now, and I'm not talking about it to bring up the carnivore diet, but man, I've broken it, I think, more times than I just need to write down, Jesse, you don't have to cheat every time someone else is cheating, because they're not on the diet, right? They're not cheating because they're not on it. Just because they're having ice cream doesn't mean you need to have it, right? But that's the same thing in Christianity. As disciples of Jesus, we need to teach people why they need to be here. And this gets back to raising disciples. It's very hard, I've got 4 kids, and I've got one young child who does not want to be here until he's here. He loves it when he's here. But every Sunday and Wednesday, it's a fight that he does not want to come. I guess I gave out who it is because I only have one here. You knew anyway, yeah. You knew anyway. But he gets here, he loves it. And so how do I navigate? Well, we got to be there, right? It's and you can throw the guilt on real heavy, which I've done before. You can make it, find out, it just becomes a mess. It becomes a fight. It becomes and then he's here and he's mad while he's here. And then I'm like, well, why are we here if we're mad, right? And then I'm yelling at him because he's mad. Well, why are you mad? We're here to worship God. It's like, well, you made me mad, Yes, I did. And that's phraseology matters. Come on, we have to go to church. Or come on, we get to. We have the privilege today to go worship God. Huh? Oh, we need to. Yeah, and I'm telling you, there are times where I'm like, I need God's people, and I need worship, and I need praise, and I need the songs, and I need it all, right? But when we're raising disciples, if our kids for the first 18 years of their life only come here because they have to and because dad says so, or else, somewhere along the way, you've got to transition those conversations into, why are we here? What are we doing? What's the point? What are we supposed to get out of this? Right? And this is what Jesus is getting at, because he talks about this idea of the eye is the lamp of the body. Now, this phrase has scholars up and down trying to figure out what is he talking about. There's a lot of different Jewish sayings out there and Greek sayings. But I think in context, everybody knows exactly what he's talking about. When you ever have like a sparkle in your eye when you look at something or you want something, your eyes are almost focused on it more than other things. You ever walk in, it's like me walking into a certain bookstore and I see the book that I want. Every other book does what? It just goes away. And I singularly focus. I know exactly what aisle I'm going to, and I'm going there and I'm going to pull it off the shelf. Right? And nothing else matters. And that's exactly what he's talking about. when you love money, and money, I like the King James Version only because it uses manna, because manna really represents everything, right? A treasure that is not God. Everybody can tell what you desire by what you go after. What causes that sparkle in your eye when you talk about it, right? Everybody can tell what's important to you, right? I don't think attendance is one of those things that's, you got to have a certain attendance record at church, to like be faithful and go to heaven. But man, if you're here, 20% of the time, people start to wonder, do you even want to be here, right? Do you want what God is offering? Do you feel the need to be here? Do you understand, and maybe it's just, I don't get anything out of it, right? That could be. But the point is, you can't serve two masters. And when you're raising disciples, can your kids tell what's important to you? What you've put first? They can. You never have to say it. You never have to tell them what's first in your life. They will see it by what you do. Where do you spend your time? If you have something that you do 90% of your day, they're going to go, that's what my dad loves. That's what my mom loves. That's where their heart is. You can say you put God first all day long, but eventually kids catch on, don't they? And they see something different than you say. So, we've got to be better at not just saying we serve God and love God. We've got to show that we serve and love God by where we spend our time, what we do with our free time, what we talk to our kids about, what do we talk to our spouse about, all those types of things come into play. Any questions or comments on that, Kathy?
Don't underestimate the coming to services because of the requirements or the need to do so. There are times that we do it because of that.
Oh, yeah. That was my point at the beginning.
And we serve God even when we don't do that. And sometimes we get greater blessings because of it, not just because. Sometimes it's God's way of saying, thank you for trying.
Yeah, and I think, and this goes back, and once again, this is that balance, right? This goes back to that balance. If you write down your commitments, or you know your commitments, you know who you're devoted to, you know who you're trying to serve, that's what helps you during the times where you're like, I don't want to be, but I know where I need to be, right? But I'm saying when it goes to the extreme of it's really not even your desire, you just know, maybe if your wife guilting you or your husband guilting you. And I'm not talking about one time. I'm not talking about, or a couple weeks. Because there are times you go through phases, don't you? You go through phases where because you made a commitment a long time ago, it got you through some bad years, right? But I also think we need to have those conversations with our kids when we're in those moments. Because they can see that our life is not going well. They can see that there are things in our life that are messed up. They can see that we're having struggles, maybe with work, or maybe with our relationship, or maybe with our faith, or maybe in doubt. Those are great discipleship moments. I mean, you look at Jesus' disciples, he had to constantly remind them and talk with them, right, and reprioritize them. Do you think sometimes we need to reprioritize ourselves? And our kids need to be a part of that process. We sometimes hide so much from our kids, but when we hide it, they see stuff, right? They still see stuff. You can try to hide and baggage it and stuff it but they read us better than we can sometimes read them. My kids know when I'm having a good day or bad day. They can see it all over me. I can't hide it. I can put on the fake smile, and they see through it. And I get mad when they question about it, right? I'm doing good. Here you go, man. We're having a great day. How dare you think that I'm not happy? You're right. But I think those are good moments for us to say, you know what? Life isn't always going to be good. You are going to have times where you get bad news or you have a bad day. And yet, that's a great time to say, you know what, why we are committed to going Wednesday night, why we're committed to going Sunday night, even if we don't always make it, why we're committed to go to Sunday, not because we're trying to get some checklist on an attendance sheet. Is because when I'm in these moments, what do I need? Where do I need to be? And that goes back to the need. But I think if you live your life like that forever, there's got to come a time where it switches and flips, where there are joyous moments. There are, the commitment level. Your focus is on God to the point where everything else kind of goes away. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Any other questions or comments? Fred?
I'm going to monopolize some more of your time.
That's all right.
It reminds me when I was in the military and at the Air Force Academy, and I was beginning my senior year, the senior summer, where you're supposed to get all the good deals, and I had not gotten a chance to jump out of an airplane, so I decided to go join the Army for that summer and go down to Fort Benning and jump out of airplanes. And everybody thought it was crazy. He said, why would you want to go get abused? You've already been through abuse, you're done, you're graduating this year. Why would you go back and with the 18-year-olds and get abused in the hot summer in Georgia? And, after getting there and no air conditioning and being 100 degrees, and several people died that summer, Rangers out there in Georgia, and I thought about it and I said, it's never as bad as you think it's going to be most of the time. So when you decide to do something, you may have some anxiousness and you may not like part of it, but then when you stand in the door of an airplane and you jump out of it, kind of makes it all worth it.
Yeah.
So it's, so I guess my point is that yes, if you do come here out of obligation or because you feel a commitment, after what Kathy said, it's really, you're going to end up, there's going to be nuggets of joy in there that you're going to be better off for having done it and stayed with a commitment than saying, oh, I don't want to be a phony and I don't want to be a hypocrite, so I'm not going to show up because there's no it's better to go and deal with that part of your psyche that says, hey, I don't really want to be here. Chances are you might find something there that day because you were there that day and somebody else was there that day. Something's going to happen and bless you because you were there.
And I think what Jesus is getting at, and we're going to talk about this. You see this girl? Her eyes are kind of bugged out. That's what I tried to get at least. One eye's looking this way, one eye's looking that way. I've got a buddy who I love to death, and his eyes always wander. And my cousin's eye, he has a lazy, and it'll just, and you're kind of like, you kind of follow it. You're wondering if he's in the room with you. But people, and this is the point, I think what we're bringing up is good stuff, but I think it's different than what Jesus is addressing. Jesus is addressing the person who is showing up and doesn't want to be there, not because maybe they're having a bad day, but because they're committed somewhere else. Their commitment, and I don't mean just for like the day, that I'm talking about their master. Their master may be money or work or some kind of thing they're doing at home or some kind of extracurricular activity. They've become mastered by something else. And they've allowed a new master to come into their heart. And that is why maybe even when they are here, they're not here. And when they're not here because they don't really feel the need to be here. They're not committed to be here. And Jesus says, wherever your heart is, wherever you set your eye on, what's eventually going to happen? When you're driving down the road, what happens when you look to the left? Where does the car go? It goes left. You want to stay straight, don't you? But man, that fancy chicken that was dancing on the side of the road, I don't know if you've ever seen that. I haven't, but I imagine the Moana chicken, out there with his eyes bugging out. I'd want to watch that. But if you do that, the car goes left. So Jesus is saying, set your eye. Paul would say, set your mind on the things above. And you may not know always how to get through, but if your eye is set on the right thing, you'll make it through. But if your eye is set on the wrong thing, when those hard days comes up, the excuse, I don't need to be there. I've got other things I can do. Right? And I think we all know when we are justifying because our heart's not in it, and when we're just having a rough day and we're struggling getting there. You know what I'm saying? You think those are two different things?
I'm trying to figure out how to say this, but
Just say it.
I think we go because it's in our heart, but we go because that's what we do. But I think we are an example. And the example for me is my oldest son. For years, he didn't go. And he said, you made me go when we were little. And I said, well, I didn't make you go. That's what we do. We go to church. But now he takes his kids to church.
Yeah. And that goes
So
back
I
to the
think
Proverbs.
it's an example, and you have to be an example for them to learn. It's part of what we do because it's who we are, and that's what we do. We go to
Okay,
church.
and there is a good term. It's who we are. Right? And I don't always like to bring up sports, to tear down sports, because I'm a sports guy. I mean, I grew up in a sports family, love sports myself. But it's interesting to me when it could be horrible weather out, and I'm going back to the Buffalo Bills, okay? I'm talking about New York, 6 feet of snow, negative 10 degrees outside. And these crazy, insane Buffalo Bills fan, guess what they're going to be doing at 7 o'clock in the morning on game day? But guess what on Sunday, when it's time to go to church in a warm building that's been plowed out, right? I stayed too late at the game last night. Or, it's really my only day off. Really? What'd you do with your other day off? Saturday, right? Not everybody has Saturday off. I understand that. But I'm saying the excuses that we come up with, they don't bleed into the things that we really love. And I think the point is, if you really love something, excuses are the last thing to come up. If someone's not there, they're going, wow, where is this person's not here? Like whenever Dan and Diane are not here, I'm going to use you guys for a moment. Whenever they're not here, they could be missing 1 week and everybody's going, where's Dan and Diane? Because they don't miss. They don't. Where are they? They have a level of commitment. And there are some people when they miss, they're going, well, it's just, they miss every, 2-3 weeks. They miss every couple weeks, It's kind of become who they are, right? And my question is, once again, we try not to judge people just because of their attendance level, but this is an internal judgment now. Jesus is calling you to reflect, why have you been missing? And once again, we're now just talking about attendance. Christianity is so much more than Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday. This is just a good area for us to use to talk about the rest of our life. But you have to self-reflect. Why am I here? Why am I not here? When I'm not here, what are my excuses? And are they good ones? Or they're like armpits. Everybody has one, they all stink, right? Cindy, go ahead.
Exactly. I had a friend from high school post actually today this meme, and it was to paraphrase it, it was, bash. It was asking, why do people stay at home and watch services streamed?
Yeah.
And he in the meme was attacking it, saying, that was a bad thing. And then all of a sudden, the whole big string of, well, that's the only way I can
It's
do
the
it.
internet.
Or
It's Facebook.
yeah, we're on vacation, blah, 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 blah. It's a convenience when we're going out of town or whatever. And I started thinking about it. And I know some people that definitely could be here in the building, but have found it very comfortable, I believe, to be sitting at home streaming it. And that worries me. It worries me that that's become a convenience and a habit more than anything, I believe. And how do we get those people back in here? Because that's what we're talking about. It's so important.
So if you're listening online,
Well, I'm sure they are, and I'm sure.
all right, we're going to turn the heat up.
I don't really care because my heart, I worry about. I worry about.
No, me too. I do. And that's joking aside. There are people who are using it because it is very beneficial. But I asked the question, did live streaming just expose a level of commitment that was already there to begin with? Or did it create it? And I think sometimes it could be both, right? You use it once, oh, that was nice. Use it again. Oh, that was really nice. And then all of a sudden you see yourself falling, kind of like the Pharisees, right? They fell into a trap. They got the compliment once. Oh, it was nice. They got the compliment twice. Ooh. Then they didn't get it, and they feel that void. Then they got to do something to get it, right? And so if you're at home watching and you can be here, we ask you to be here. Really. I mean, and you have to self-reflect, what is my reason for being home and not being a part of the family that is here? Because there's so much you miss. If you just come here to hear me speak, I mean, you're getting about 10% of what you ought to be getting out of when you come. Yeah. Yep.
Or if you're sick or something like that. But otherwise, to me, you're supposed to be here.
Yeah.
Because that's a convenience for things, like I said.
Because one of the commands in Hebrews chapter 11 is to stimulate one another to love and good works. That's a command for everybody to be a part of. And if you're never a part, how can you do that? Right? Once again, there are people who, because of certain health and things of that nature, but I ask, people who sit at home and watch, why are you doing it? Right? Where's the convenience level? And was that the first bell or second bell? That leads us really well into the next, do not be anxious for nothing, right? Because, obviously live streaming kind of came out of this COVID pandemic, anxious worry. There was a lot that went on in that. And there are times where our worry gets in the way of us really living out our faith, doesn't it? Our anxiousness. This is the section I avoid reading in the Sermon on the Mount, because this is the one that I struggle with. I mean, anxiousness and worry. Ask my wife, if I know I have to be somewhere, I cannot get ready until the last minute, because I am the person that will pace, and I'm like, I just got to go. Just when I'm ready, I just got to go, and I'm ready to go, and I'm ready, and I can't. I have to wait till last minute to be ready, right? And that's kind of a small thing. But in the world that we live in, is there not a lot to be concerned about? But once again, here's the world, and here's Jesus. You can't be worried about both equally at the same time. Now, there are things that Jesus is concerned about that involves what? Involves the world. So that's, we involve ourselves in the world because Jesus is involved in the world, and God is involved in the world because He built the world, created the world. But once again, if there are a lot of people who are so concerned about the world, they actually use Jesus as a means to, sometimes I'm not necessarily, I'm for justice. There are some things about the social justice aspect that I think have gone way too far, and people use Jesus as a means, right, to try to promote really a more worldly concept of justice than the social justice kind of stuff that have come out, right? And so Jesus can be used in many ways. And anxiousness and worry, it just confuses all of this. It really does. And I'm trying not to get too specific because just trying for everybody to really relate it to their own lives. But I really want to read the first couple verses here. Therefore I tell you. And you almost see Jesus kind of coming back. He was, beware. Now he's saying, therefore, now I tell you, do not be anxious about your life. And this kind of gets back to the prayer, fasting, right? The prayer, fasting, the giving to the needy, and the whole laying up your treasures in heaven thing. Because I think a lot of people do what they do because I am what you would call at times a people pleaser, right? I worry that if I know somebody is upset with me, or if I know somebody doesn't like me, that bothers me. It bothers me greatly. And, I don't know why anybody would ever be upset with me, right? That's just, that would go through my head. I'm just kidding. But I'm like, and some people are like, well, I didn't tell you because it wasn't a big deal, or I didn't tell you because I didn't want to. It's like, Listen, I want to know. Because I worry about that, right? Because I worry, and sometimes my worry, there have been many times my worry about the world and what people think of me have influenced the way that I preach and teach and live out my faith. That should not be. Now, is Jesus sometimes tell us to be concerned about how we influence others and that's why we're to teach the truth in love? We aren't just to be completely uninterested in people's thoughts about us. But when it becomes the main thing, that's when the preaching kind of takes on the people-pleasing and the tickling of the ears, right, that Paul warned Timothy about, right? So all these things, it's not a one or this. It's not a this or that. It's a focus on Jesus and the things that he focused on, and all these other things that we're going to talk about, it'll just fall into place. All these worries we have about the world and people liking us and things, follow Jesus, and those things kind of work themselves out. Not always in a way that's, but for ourselves and our peace and our faith in Christ. Okay? All right, good class. I guess we'll finish next week. Sermon on the Mount.